Please welcome to the Redeem podcast my friend Travis. He is a host of Oscar Mike Radio. He interviewed me a while back. I've learned so much from Travis. He amazes me by the things that he's done. Travis was in Marines. He has had this podcast since 2016. 433 episodes, which blows my mind. I was just asking, have you been doing an episode every week? Because that is hard. The answer is yes. He has been featured on C-SPAN because of all of his hard work, the things that he pours into the veteran community.
There is an aspect of loneliness, and it's really weird. You have social media, you have all these things to fill up our time and fill our lives and supposedly connect with one another, but we are still separated somehow. Loneliness is a true precursor to suicidal ideations. The person goes through some hurt, pain, separation, whatever, stay separated. It gets easier to stay away from people, and finally they feel cut off. Whether it's real or imagined, they feel that way.
Have you ever found yourself struggling through life's unexpected twists, wondering, this isn't what I planned or hoped for? If so, you're not alone. Life rarely goes as expected, even when we think we've mapped it all out. Psalms 107:2, let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story, those he redeemed from the hand of the foe. Welcome to the Redeem Podcast, a place of encouragement and hope. Through honest conversations and powerful interviews, we'll explore incredible stories of transformation and resilience, even in the face of the impossible. I'm Lauren Burns, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Travis, welcome to the Redeem Podcast. Thank you for taking your time to talk with us today.
Lauren, it's a pleasure and honor. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I want to know a little bit about your history. What made you have the desire to serve in the military? Because that's not for everybody.
It was late 80s, early 90s. I was kind of, for a lot of reasons, kind of bouncing around between the ages of 19 and my early 20s. I was working in Shreveport, Louisiana for, it's still there, Mike Morgan Pontiac, parking cars. And I'm like, I got to do something with my life. I mean, this is, Mike's a great guy. It's a great little place to work, a Shreveport institution, but I need to do something else. And I'm not going to get there. Student loans weren't a thing back then, really. Options were limited. And I said, I'm going to join the military. And the funny thing is, Lauren, Shreveport Bossier, the Twin Cities, as they call it, is actually an Air Force city. The Barksdale Air Force Base is in Bossier City, the Strategic 8th Air Command. So it's B-52s, A-10s, KC-10s, that kind of thing. And I'd gone to several of the air shows. The base is a great place. I'm like, I won't do the Air Force. That's too easy. If we're going to do this, let's join the Marine Corps. So I took my ASVAB test, and they're like, hey, I was going to be a machine gunner. And, do that. And that's really cool. And they're like, no, you're not being a machine gunner. You're going to go into aviation. Trust us on this one. So I packed up. I went to boot camp. I went out to San Diego, which was a very beautiful place until you're at the boot camp. I got out and, went through MCT and got my posting into Hawk School. And that was at Fort Bliss, Texas. And Hawk is a missile. If you see this missile logo, it's a missile that the Marine Corps fired for many years in the Army too. It's actually being used in Ukraine right now. And it's about as long as your car. We fired at airborne targets. And so joining the Marine Corps did all that. It really kind of gave me purpose. It gave me this aspect that if I can fire a missile, I can do anything I put my mind to. And there's some really good times.
Now, you have to educate me. So you're firing a missile. Are you in an aircraft firing a missile, or is this on the land?
Thank you. So it's a surface-to-air missile system. So we're in a control van. We went out in the middle of the desert to do this stuff, and Hawk is primarily used around air bases and naval shipyards and other infrastructure places. So you set up the launchers, the acquisition radar, the tracking radar, and the control van. And we sit in the control van, and we're getting our radar feeds and other feeds, and we're looking at airborne targets. And if one pops up and we get the command to fire, we'll engage with it. It's kind of like, if you watch the new Top Gun, and Tom
Yes.
Cruise is flying. Yeah, those are
Yes.
those missiles he's evading are Hawk missiles, and we have a bone to pick with him about that because you can dodge one. We'll give you one. But you're not dodging 4 or 5. So that's
But you're
kind of
not
the whole
Tom
thing.
Cruise. Just
No,
kidding.
I'm not. I'm not. But I would have a bone to pick with Tom Cruise about that.
Now, Travis, where's your family from? So, why were you in Shreveport?
I grew up in the Midwest, and then my
Okay.
dad at the time got a job at the coal mine, and there's an actual coal mine in around the Mansfield area of Louisiana, and he had all the qualifications to work on all the heavy duty electrical equipment and went down there, and that's what he did. So we moved to Louisiana.
Well, I live not far from Shreveport. We would take that drive down I-20 to the casinos. Was there anyone in your family that was military, or were you the first person?
My grandfathers were. My grandfathers both
Okay.
served in World War II in some capacity, Navy, both of them.
What was your upbringing like? Were you raised in a faith-based home? What did that look like?
I was raised in a faith-based home, Southern Baptist, one of those environments where if the church doors are open, we're expected to be there.
Mhm.
Youth camp, youth group, church choir, Bible quizzing, sword drills, the whole 9 yards. We did it all. I was homeschooled, actually. My parents believed strongly in that, so that was kind of like my upbringing. One of those kids who could quote the Bible to you and tell you all about Bible stuff.
Going into the military and being out on your own for the first time, what did that look like?
Well, that was like one of those things where it's like, wow, okay, we are out on my own. This is a different world, a different speed, different expectations, and you realize you got 18, 19-year olds. Your boss is 25, 26 years old, and you're doing stuff that most adults will never do, much
Mm.
less your classmates and peers growing up. And it was just a very interesting, cool time to be able to do that kind of job and understand what was about it. I was stationed in Marine Corps Air Station, Yuma, Arizona. We did our training at the Cannon Air Defense Complex, and it people don't understand. We trained all year long, and out in Yuma, in the summertime, it's 118 to 125 degrees, and we're out there getting it done. And the desert is a very harsh, brutal environment. You had to really mind the gear that you're working on so you didn't get hurt, but you also have to be aware that, hey, if we're not drinking water, if we're not looking at where we put our feet, we could get hurt or killed very easily. All that wrapped into a very really surreal experience when I look back on it. I was never deployed. In fact, it's funny. We went to a couple places in the US. We went out in the desert all the time, but Hawk was actually being replaced by the Army's Patriot system when I went in. So about 3/4 of the way through my tour, we packed up all our gear and went home. I did bury multiple Marines during my time in the Marine Corps. One of them was what we would call a work accident, and the rest of them were things like, someone's in a car, they shouldn't have been drinking, and
Mm.
they ran off the road. And that left a mark on us because you realize that, hey, the Marine Corps will tell you you can do anything you want. You're invulnerable almost. You could run through a brick wall, and you find out very quickly that life is not that way, that, we're very fragile, actually.
In a blink of an eye, right? Doesn't matter how old you are or what situation you're in, if you're in the military or if you're a civilian.
Absolutely.
And you also talk about weightlifting. You started weightlifting when you were 17, is that
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
Weightlifting and being a Marine, all of these are a lot of putting a lot of dedication and work and striving at a goal. So how did your weightlifting help you as a Marine?
I couldn't really weightlift while I was in the Marine Corps. The two didn't mix. But it was funny that a lot of lessons, to your point, applied in weightlifting and the Marine Corps. Even when I got out, right, you have to show up. You have to be on time for your coach. You have to take instruction, and you have to be able to take criticism. And the Marine Corps and a coach will hand those out in ample amounts there, Lauren. And you'll start a train evolution like now, like it's January recording this, for a train evolution that will conclude in this time next year. So there's this aspect of delayed gratification.
Mm.
and constantly improving on, you'll never be perfect, right? But you can, continuously improve what you're doing to meet that objective. And I think that's why, weightlifting and weightlifters and Marines really resonate with me is, it's a purpose driven exercise to your initial statement.
Mm. And I think your podcast is purpose driven as well. I mean, that's why you've done 433 episodes. You don't just do that and put your life work into this because you work full time for another career. The
Yeah,
podcast, it's two jobs, but you
sure.
see the benefit and how you're affecting people's lives.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Some people are like, oh, it's just a hobby, but it doesn't feel like a hobby to me. I'm also not one of those podcasters with this that I'm trying to make money. I'm sure if someone wanted to pay me to do it, it would be great. But I find if I focus the podcast on money, the number of followers, the number of downloads, the conversations then become transactional. And I think one of the reasons I still enjoy doing this is I'm not chasing status, downloads, money. I'm all about the conversation that I have with the person. It's about their story. One of the things I said before to people, if they listen to me long enough, is it's not really about 10,000, 12,000, 100,000 downloads. It's about one. If
Mhm.
if the conversation I have with somebody impacts one life, whether it's the
Mhm.
guest life or somebody listening to me, and they take that conversation and either decide not to end their life, decide to improve their life, or decide to give of themselves for somebody else's life, then I could do 1,000, 10,000 episodes, Lauren. That one life, that one show will be worth the rest of the 10,000, right? So I find for me, when I focus on the aspect of one and one alone, everything else makes sense. Everything else is great because, we might have this conversation. Somebody out there might hear it and it might change their life. How cool would that be? But if you focus on the one, then a lot of other good stuff follows.
Well, Travis, since you told me you know the Bible and you memorized it all when you were a kid, that's
Oh
what
boy.
God says. I mean, okay, so if we talk, and I can't remember where it is in the
All
Bible,
right.
I'll find it later. But the woman at the well, Jesus
Oh
went to the woman
yes.
at the well, to the one, and the one that what had multiple husbands or wasn't with her husband, the adulteress, went to the one and ministered to her, the person no one else would talk to. And she went back to
Right.
the village and told the whole village about Jesus. And that's what you're saying, Travis. Focus on the one person, and God's going to do the rest. I mean, He's going to send the stories and the episodes wherever He wants, because that's the whole mission and the purpose. And when I got to be on one of the shows when we did multiple people, y'all were teaching me, and you're going to have to correct me and tell me what the term is, but the suicide rate for military, for veterans, what is it? 22? Am I remembering that
So
correctly?
it's called the 22 a day. And this was back in 2013, 2014, when, the VA, a lot of other orgs, veteran service organizations, healthcare, were like, wait a minute, we do have a problem here. We have a segment of the population, males, and these males either, all served or are serving the military are committing suicide at an exponentially high rate. And the VA finally did the numbers and said it's 22 a day. Now, there are some studies that say that number has gone down. During COVID, it peaked up, but it's still commonly known as 22 a day. And that's about right.
That's where that term comes from.
Yes.
Since you've been hosting Oscar Mike Radio, and you'll have to tell us what Oscar Mike stands for, what have you seen and what have you heard? How have you ministered to people's lives through the things that you do?
What I've seen and heard is there is an aspect of loneliness. And it's really weird. You have social media, you have all these things to fill up our time and fill our lives and supposedly connect with one another. But we are still separated somehow. And I'll have to pull up the study, and I was reading some of the VA stuff where they're finding out they can say this with authority now that loneliness is a true precursor to suicidal ideations. So the person goes through some hurt, pain, separation, whatever, stays separated, stays away from people, it gets easier and easier to stay away from people. And finally, they feel cut off, whether it's real or imagined. They feel that way, and your perception is your reality, right? So they feel this way. They feel cut off. They feel, and they don't know how to re-engage with society or with their peers or with their family even. And so when you feel alone, when you feel cut off and you feel like you don't have any purpose or any value, it's like, well, why am I going through all this? It'd just be easier if I was gone. No one's going to miss me anyway, which is
Mm.
completely not the truth, right? That's how they feel. So what I have found, and I use myself as an example, I was going through a very difficult time personally. And from about 2011 to 2014, 2015, I felt pretty hopeless. I was walking through my shadow of the valley of death. And, a lot of evil was being cast at me. I'm sitting there trying to figure out what to do. And my lawyer tells me to go to the local VA in Brockton, Massachusetts, and serve coffee and donuts, Dunkin', by the way, to veterans that were in the Brockton VA. I'm like, why am I doing this, man? I'm not paying for this kind of advice, but okay, because she's a small woman of stature, but I'm telling you what, her bite is worse than her bark. So I better do what
Mm.
she says. I go down there and it's this Thanksgiving time, and I'm pouring coffee and a donut to a guy living in a 10 by 20 room who
Mm.
thinks I'm the cat's meow, the bee's knees, the supreme dude for coming there and pouring some coffee, telling some stories, cracking some jokes, and making his day. And that's when I'm like, you think you've got it bad. You think you've got it lonely. This might be the only time in a year where someone other than the staff actually interacts with this person, and he is happy to see me. Something's got to change. So
Mm.
what I started doing was trying to find ways to get out of my apartment. I joined the Marine Corps League, and I did other things. And around that time, I got to do some guest hosting on WVBF AM 1530 in Taunton, Massachusetts. Some really cool guys would have you come down there and guest host. And I love radio, so I'm like, let's do this. They would have me do, like, when someone of a military mind or veteran stuff was coming on, they would want me to come down and talk with them. And I started like, I like this. How do I do more of this? And airtime's expensive, radio studio time's expensive. And I got
Mm.
into this podcasting thing. So a long way of answering your question is I started finding some purpose. And my purpose was getting behind a microphone, having to show up, having to perfect my craft, and talking to somebody who I don't know about where they've come from, where they're going, how they
Mm.
got there. And hopefully someone hears that, gets a ray of light in their darkness, in their valley, and chooses life instead of death.
Hmm. Yeah. That's amazing. By stepping out and going to serve some coffee and donuts, and then 2016 you launched your own podcast. And but if you would have stayed in that dark place, in that depression, you don't have to be in the military and a veteran. Their anxiety and depression is all around us. I feel like that is just like the devil attacking not just the United States, everywhere.
Yeah,
We feel like we're so connected by a cell phone, but like you just said, people are so alone. And the Bible over and over again talks about community. We need community. We're not meant to do life alone. I love that that's been your outreach.
absolutely. And it's just one of those things where it becomes kind of like a self-cooking ice cream cone where I do this. It tastes pretty good. I'll keep doing it. And guess what? It tastes that good. It tastes better and better and better. And it's never gotten old. It's never gotten
Mm.
old. It's never been a drag. It's hard work. I'm not going to diminish
Yeah.
that. It's a lot of effort, but it never gets old more.
How have you seen God show up in your life over the years, Travis?
Oh, wow. I'll be candid with you, Lauren. I mean, I think God and I get along pretty good. God speaks to me when I'm on my motorcycle. God speaks to me when I'm on the archery range, or when I take a quiet moment. But, you know, I'm not really a church going guy. There's a lot of reasons for that. But God really came back in my life in a big way when I ruptured my quadricep tendon in 2022. And it was an old Marine Corps injury that finally came due. And I'm like sitting there in the hospital, like, why? I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do this, I don't do that. Why am I going through this? And It's funny. I'm sitting there and I'm waiting to hear what's going on. I feel very alone, very isolated. And I'm not kidding you. Something said, "Hey, this is going to be okay. Remember Job? Remember Job?" And I'm not kidding you. I'm like, they had not done the X-ray yet, and I'm sitting there, and the lady's coming by with a clipboard for the umpteenth time, asking my name, social security number, and date of birth. I'm like, we need to answer the important questions here, ma'am. When am I getting something to eat? But doing all that, I felt very, very vulnerable and alone, and I almost cried. I mean, to tell you honestly, but something said, "Hey, this is going to be okay. There's a reason for this." And I didn't know what that was. I didn't understand what was going on. And I started going through this process. I got my first aha moment when, I'm posting about, my recovery and what's going on with it. Someone said, "Hey, I'm in England and my husband had the same injury you had. And your attitude seems different than his. He's telling people how just beaten he is, but you seem upbeat. Can I show him your videos?" I said, "Yeah, that's why I made them." And so I got a sense that maybe that's something that God wanted me to do is tell some other guy that, "Hey, sucks. This is hard. This is bad. It's not fun. As you know, you're a physical therapist, Lauren, but I'm getting through it." And then during that time, I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't really travel easily. I couldn't do anything. So I had to really focus on the art and the craft of podcasting. I started writing. I'm getting to this point now where I got told a couple months ago, like, "You ought to write a book about this." I'm like, "No one's going to read a book about this. I know what it takes to write a book. It's not easy on a good day. There's no support for this. It's not going to happen." And so, Lauren, all of a sudden, the last like 2 months, God's like, "Hey, here's an editor for you, believes in what you do. Oh, here's someone who's going to help you support you and do it. Here's a tool." That is to say, there's all these things God's putting in my life to show me that, hey, there's a reason this happened, can do it, and you're not going to do it alone. I think God has a really cool sense of humor. And
Yes, he does.
I think sometimes they're chuckling. That is to say that in that, I realized that, I don't know what's really going to happen with all this. It's been 3.5 years, but there are certain things where I'm like, it would have been easy to lay down, cry, self-isolate, and be very angry and bitter. And God showed me a better way.
Yeah, it's like, no, 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 no. I have a plan and a purpose for your life. And when you said Job, I mean, that stood out to me because I've heard 2 people in 2 days, now you're the third, has mentioned Job. And I'm like, oh no, please not Job. I also love, Travis, your honesty. You're like, I'm not a church going person. That's okay. There's a lot of people that I call it church hurt or whatever you want to call it. People have been hurt by religion and, people have turned away, but you have a relationship with God and, you're talking to him, you're praying with him, you're in the Bible. Yes, we need that community. And you probably have that community with your podcast and your friends. God can use your story and your injury and all that you walk through. And you're like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do weightlifting. And you have recently, you've been posting on social media.
Oh, that's just the best. I'll let you explain some of the more technical aspects of what the quadricep does.
Sure.
Lauren, you're better at it than I am. But, I got hurt and a couple people in weightlifting and sports said, "Hey, you're an older guy. You've got some miles on you. The idea of you being able to compete at a high level again is probably not for you. There's no harm in walking away. No one's going to diminish what you've done, but you might want to consider retirement." And I talked to 2 different people. One of them did not do their PT and was very upfront about it. One of them did his PT and said, "Hey, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to diminish this. The next 6 to 9 months of your life are going to be hard. But if you do the hard work, if you embrace the pain and the progress, you can come out and do really well." This is where, leaning back on my Marine Corps time and things I learned in the Marine Corps, this is where, I said, okay, I call him the Supreme Commandant, "Hey, the Supreme Commandant, if you want me to stand you at the pearly gates, I got to get this right. I'm going to try to get this right." And I went through all that, and the VA was a great resource, Lauren. They get a lot of negative feedback a lot of times, but my VA PT team said, "Hey, if you If you meet us halfway and we see you trying, we're going to give you everything we can. My coach said, this is going to be hard. You're asking something hard here, but we're going to work through it. Long story short, I went to Valley Forge and looked at the Howard Cohen American Masters. I took third place, and it was a really cool moment driving home on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. I was praying to God. I was, singing hymns, Onward Christian Soldiers. I mean, my eyes have seen the coming of the glory of the Lord. We have trampled on, right? I mean, we had church in the car, Lauren. God was
Yes,
in the car. We were having
I
church,
like
and the
it.
Spirit was, and I can say that, right? And because it wasn't just me that did this. I think, something told me, a little small voice told me, hey, there's a reason for this. Getting that medal was just a part of the work. And then I showed my VAPT team the medal, and they're like, I'm going to try to get you guys gold. And she's like, Travis, Dr. Gielin's like, Travis, don't you get it? You've already won. Go ahead and get gold. Go ahead and go for it, but you've already won so much. And I'm very grateful. I've learned a really sense of gratitude going through this, and understanding that, yes, money is good and money is great. And, I like making it, sure, absolutely. But, if you don't have gratitude, it's that verse, right? What profit man to, conquer the whole world but lose his soul? You got to focus on the soul. You got to understand the healing the soul to live a full life.
Yeah. Well, and that takes me back to when you said you went and served coffee to the man that needed you so much. And there's so much of that going on still in the world. It's easy to be on a podcast behind a computer screen. It's hard to step out of your bubble and go and minister to the people that maybe other people don't want to minister to. Your story has so many glimpses of like perseverance and stepping out and giving of yourself whenever you're being beat down and lonely. When you go and minister to someone else, God, like, hey, I'm going to pour into you more and more. And the more you give in faith, the more he's going to open those doors, right?
It's something else. All this stuff is like, what is going on here? But I think you're right. I believe you're right. I know you're right.
I love even just our connection. That's the whole podcasting journey has been amazing, because I know you probably felt like this way back in 2016, if you remember. It's like, what am I doing? How am I going to
Right.
have more than 2 episodes? How am I going to do this? And God is like, just sit back and trust me and keep praying, and then trust me and follow me. And there's verses, and I'll find them. It takes faith, yes, but there has to be action. You have to step out of that comfort. And that's what you've done over and over again, is stepping out.
It's been an amazing experience. And this purpose has led to other things that have been completely outside of podcasting, the microphone. And I do want to touch on something that you did say. It's good that I'm behind the microphone. I love being behind the microphone. I'm getting used to being on camera. But I would encourage anyone, whether you're in this type of podcasting or not, you can step out behind the microphone and add so much more value to someone's life when you actually interact with them. And you actually, sit across from them. I think that's one thing that I think you understand, because you heal. You're helping us heal, and you have to make a connection physically and emotionally and clinically, and build that trust with your patient to allow them to move forward. So I think that really resonates.
Yeah, sometimes they don't like me. You remember those days too, right?
Do 15 more. Well, what?
We like that number.
15
Someone told
more?
me that yesterday. Like, you really like the number 15. I'm like,
Doc, there's someone taking the blowtorch to my leg. That's great. The nerves are starting to
"Okay,
refire. Do 15 more.
do it again." And then come back tomorrow and let's do it again. Travis,
But
thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything else that you would like to say that we didn't get to touch on?
I think the only thing that I would leave you with is you're starting your show, and you're getting into your groove. You're finding your way. You're finding your path. And it doesn't matter if it's podcasting. It doesn't matter if it's, anything else that is like what you're doing with your podcast. Your life has value. Your story has value. And you can figure out a way to take what you have and add value to somebody else. And we're going to go back to the Bible, right? Remember the parable of the talents?
Mhm.
You had the guy getting one talent, and the person with one talent didn't do anything with it and didn't multiply it. But the person with 3 talents took 3 and made like 9 or 12 with it. You can take what you have and make more of it if you're willing to do that and put the work in. And so I just would leave anybody with the fact that, hey, both of us took what we have. We're very different people, Lauren, you and I, but we had something. We figured out what we wanted to say, and we said it, and we added value to people's lives. So I'm going to close with this. Again, everybody has value. And if you start with yourself, I promise you, somebody else will get value out of what you have.
Oh, and I want you to explain Oscar Mike. What does it
Oh,
mean?
that's right. That's right. It's 2015. I'm trying to, figure out what would I call my show? Like, what would really what would it be? And I'm like, well, I'm going to go back to my military roots. I'm going to call it Oscar Mike Radio. My first part-time job was in radio at 98 Rocks in Shreveport, Louisiana. I'm like, I love radio. So it's going to be Oscar Mike Radio. So Oscar Mike means we're on the move, we're on mission. I'm going to be on the move for veterans, for active duty, and the people that support them.
And you are nonstop. If you go on your social media is Oscar Mike Radio on Facebook.
Yes,
Is that
ma'am.
right?
Yeah.
If
Yep.
you check out Travis's social media, you'll see he is everywhere. You'll drive out to different places to do a podcast live with people. You're everywhere.
Well, you are too, and it's just great to see, and it's a big sandbox. If I may, we need stories like yours, because I think the thing that really got me about your story when I first heard you on Tip of the Spear with Dave Wills Jr. and the Tip of the Spear crew is we don't often hear the person talk about the military people who help them out. It's generally just people like us talking about our service and helping somebody. So it's very fascinating to hear you talk about that and then share more in depth on my show. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking with you. But again, that aspect of you sharing was just a really powerful thing, Lauren. So I want you to keep at it. I do like your podcast. I listen on Spotify, folks. You want to check her out there.
Thank you very much. I mean, to honor the men that did my rescue, Dave and JD and Don, and that's just amazing. So I was so excited to be able to honor them, because I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for them risking their life for me back in 1987. That was cool for you to have me on to be able to honor them. Well, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I started to get a little glimpse into your book. I can't wait, especially as a physical therapist. I was all in talking about your rehab and your quad tendon repair and all of the things that you've gone through. And then you need to put pictures of yourself and your medal in the book before it's done.
Hang on.
Take notes.
Medal in the book with pictures per Lauren. Done.
Yes.
Well,
Yes. And then I need an autograph.
Let me ask for a bonus. Can I get a bonus? Can I get bonus time? Okay.
Yes.
You're a PT. You've been doing this a long time at a high level. Is my recovery that typical, or is it just, I did what I was supposed to do and it just worked out? Because I've been told by some PTs that I'm not the norm. And I've been told by some PTs that very few men actually put the work in that you did. So I'm just curious what you thought.
Well, so it depends on the population, because I used to work in this more sports realm. So like professional athletes. So they're the exception, right? They're going to do all the things to get back to their sport. Regular population, no. Like just to be able to walk and function and ride a bike and maybe do basic workout, that's amazing. But to go to the level of going back to lifting, powerlifting at a competition level after a quad tendon repair, it's very, very hard. It's hard to get the range of motion back in your knee, and it's hard to get that kind of strength back after that kind of a repair. It's very hard.
So the VAP worked on the first part, and then my coach says, "Hey, we're going to get your ROM back in the movements before we focus on strength."
Yeah.
So I had to. I'm doing this lightweight over and over again. They're like, "You're going to do it." And then when they felt like I had the movements down with the right range of motion, then we started working on strength.
Yeah.
So
you got to get the motion back. Let the physical therapist sit on your leg.
She didn't have to do that. But I think she would have, definitely.
Sometimes you have.
No, I was a good patient according to her. Just a really great story, because the VA gets so much negative attention. But no, these ladies are like, "Oh, he's showing up, so we're going to show up for him." So it was a really cool moment. Thank
And
you.
by the way, it's fun for them too. Like, it's so much fun as a physical therapist to see people get better and then come back and show, hey, look what I did. I mean, you know me, I do cry a lot. Like, I get emotional and I'm like, that's amazing. I was a part of your healing journey. It's very rewarding.
Oh, well, I enjoyed doing that time with them. Showing them my medal made their day, and it just made mine
Mhm,
because they saw me my absolute worst.
mhm. Well,
Awesome.
thank you.
Close in prayer. You open with
Yeah,
prayer, but I'd be honored if you'd pray over this and close with prayer, Lauren.
I sure will. Let's do it.
Thank you.
Father, I thank you so much for Travis. God, I ask you, Jesus, that you would bless all that his hands touch, Father. Every person that he comes in contact with, every episode that he does, Father. If he's a guest or if he is interviewing, God, that you would go before him, that his ministry, the things you're doing in his life would go farther than he could imagine. Father, you've given him a spirit that's so humble. He has a servant's heart to do your work. And God, I know that you honor that. And I ask that you would just continue to bless him and that you would protect him and his family in every place that he travels as he goes, God, that you would be a shield around him to protect him. And Father, for the listener listening today, God, that you would redeem and restore the broken areas of their life, to let them know they're not alone, to give them the courage to seek help if they need the help, Father. And if they are in a place of depression and loneliness, God, that you would be the light in their life and they would run back to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
A quick reminder, the Redeem podcast has a newsletter that goes out every other week. If you would like to subscribe, I will put that in the show notes so you can follow along on what's going on with the book process. And since that's on my mind, I am actually going to take a 1-week break. Thank you for those that are listening week after week. Y'all continue to amaze me. But I am going to be obedient and take a 1-week rest. I really need to dive in deep and search and ask God, what are the next steps with my book? It's coming along. My editor is fantastic. And we're about halfway through editing the first half of the book. And so we're diving into the next half. And I need to make some big decisions in the next few months. And I really feel like God is calling me to take a little break, that I can be very focused and obedient. And it's hard to do that when I'm doing a podcast and on social media. I'm still going to post some things on social media, but I'm taking a week break from the podcast. And then the following week, I will jump back in with a solo episode. And then you will get to hear an episode that I did with Lisa Woolery. She is the widow's comeback. She is going to share what she went through the day that her husband passed away, and what life was like and what life looks like now. So please come back and join me in the next few weeks as I get back on the Redeem podcast and share a solo episode and share Lisa's story. I hope that these stories, these episodes, these people that you get to meet have inspired you and encouraged you in ways that I can only imagine. And I'm going to ask for prayer. Would you take time over the next week to pray over this process of releasing my story in a book and what that's going to look like in the next few months? I thank you for your support. And as always, I hope that you know that God loves you, that He is the God of miracles, that He redeems the broken areas and restores the areas of our lives that we need restoration. I hope you have a fantastic day. Until next time.